and we'll get started if everybody's okay. So welcome everybody, and this is a Let's Explore session, and we are going to go down to the coast and have a look along the Strand Line of the beach and see what sorts of things we might see if we were going to go down and have a look. As I say, it would have been lovely to do this yesterday. It was really lovely sunshine. Still a nice day if you are able to get down and have a look, but not quite as sunny as we had yesterday. So this is all about sort of identifying what we call the Strand Line, and if I can show you on here, it's this kind of almost like seaweed line that you might see along our beaches here. So if you know the island, see this is Freshwater Bay. I just noticed actually that my dog did sneak into shot there, or one of my dogs, so apologise for that. And this here is actually down at Bonchurch, a lovely place to go down to as well. We're really lucky, obviously, on the island that we've got these great places to go, and which is why it's really, quite important that we do understand the coastal environment, and we do kind of know the sorts of creatures that we're going to share that habitat, that environment with. So this is just going to be a real quick overview of a few things that you might see on that Strand Line. And as I said, it is that kind of left by the changing tide line that we might see, marking the point of the last high tide as well. And sometimes it's kind of like debris along there. It might have more than one line as well where that's come through, and it's kind of deposited by the sea through wave action. And if you kind of, sometimes you can see that happening as well, because as the tide is at sort of slack time, you can see that the debris or the items that might be deposited later on when the tide goes back out again, floating in there, and that's what will be deposited and make that Strand Line. And normally we would see, sorry, I'm just going to let somebody in. Normally we would see sort of shells and seaweeds, sort of maybe sort of carcasses and rubbish maybe, unfortunately, and sometimes creatures as well. And along here, if I can just show you on my pointer, this interesting creature here and here, it's a sea slug. And they were really, really interesting creatures that you might see, and they're actually sea hares. And I'll show you a picture of that a bit later on, and you can see why. But I was at St Helens Beach a couple of years ago, and the whole of the Strand Line was just covered in these creatures. And they've been brought in on the tide, and a bit later on I'll show you as well what they were actually doing, so what it was that they'd also brought in with them. So that's the kind of things that we're talking about when we say the Strand Line. It's that line of kind of seaweed marking where the tide's been. And it's also this really dynamic place, so you might see the same thing twice, or you might not see the same thing again for a number of weeks. It's always new, it's always exciting to see. So when we go down to the beach, what are we going to find? And if I can show you here, this is our sea hare. If you think of it kind of turned over the other way, these would be those two ears as such, if it was a hare. And over here is their eggs, kind of spaghetti-like substance that we also found along the beach there when I found these at St Helens. And so that was what they were doing. They were actually depositing their eggs, and they've been brought in. This is again just showing you another Strand Line there, this time as Gurnard. So we do get these all around the island, but again, lots of different things. So you might see one particular type of creature in one place and not actually get it, especially where we've got kind of like the northern shores and then the kind of southern, more exposed shores, with different things being brought in at different times. So it is an exciting place to have a look at, to see the sort of varied different creatures and different things that are being brought in. And obviously it's this tides that's bringing these different things in, and just a real brief overview of tides. So we've got the sun, and we've got the moon, and we've got, if you think of kind of like, there's the moon and the earth, and this is kind of like the sea being pulled each side. And if we've got the sun and the earth and the moon kind of all lining up, we can see we've got high tides on this side, high tides on this side, and low tides on this side. So depending on where you are on the earth, that's what you're going to see. And then we also sometimes get, I think we've just recently had as well, I walked late last night, you can see a lovely really low tide at Freshwater Bay, and that's caused by it being at these kind of like angles here where you can see that pull, having a really extra high tide and then an extra low tide on the other side. Really brief overview of tides and how they work. So let's have a look at some of these things that we might see. So as we said, the most prominent way of identifying that you found that strand line is this deposit of seaweed. So they make up, as we can see in this one here, normally the main component of that strand line. And the seaweed that we see here has been detached from the seabed. It's actually a type of an algae. It does photosynthesize, so it does need sunlight to actually make its nutrients, but it also can absorb them directly from the sea. And what's really important about seaweed and about it being part of this strand line is it can then produce a nutrient base as it kind of decomposes on the sand, on the shore there, for that coastal ecosystem. So these plants you can see here that have started to kind of colonize that area of sand there, the sand dune, has been able to do that because of the seaweed deposits that have decomposed and put those nutrients back into that system. So it's really important. What it also does is provides us with a great option for hair on sea, on mermaids and other sort of sea inspired coastal art as well. So if you're ever down there and you want to make a lovely piece of art, using seaweed is also really useful. So we love seaweed. And seaweeds are really kind of uninspired, in an uninspired way, classified into colours. So we get brown seaweeds, and we've got a couple of examples here for you. And these are the racks that you would see. There's my pointer, and they've got these bladders on them here, if you can just sort of see. So full of air to help that seaweed stand upright to reach the sunlight as well, and to be able to kind of like be buoyant in the water. So this is egg rack, and these bladders look very much like the shape of eggs. And over here we've got channel rack, and this here you can see the channel down the kind of face of the seaweed, which really helps it to stay alive or stay hydrated as when it's exposed on the strand line. Excuse me. So yeah, the water can stay in that channel, and it just really helps it to stay hydrated and survive for longer. So that's a really good adaptation that the channel rack does have. So they're brown seaweeds. We've got green seaweeds, and again, really uninspired classification for them. And this one here, when I'm kind of in the past, when I've done talks on this, I always like to say, what might this particular seaweed look like? And it looks like something that you might have in your sandwiches. And yes, it's sea lettuce, that one there. And then we've got rockweed, and again, very prominent on places that have got rocks or coastal defences as well. So down at Totland Bay, you see this kind of clinging to the sea defences of the Esplanade Wall along, if you were to have a look at low tide, you'd see that there. So that's a couple of green seaweeds for you. And then we've got red seaweed. So again, not particularly inspired name classifications, brown, green, red seaweeds. This one here is called coral weed, and you can see this in rock pools quite a lot, in places like sort of Freshwater Bay, Bonchurch, St Helens Ledge, Bembridge Ledge, and it does, when it's floating in the rock pools, it does kind of look a little bit like coral, and it is actually partly made up from a calcium carbonate structure as well, so it does have similarities in that way. When it comes out of the water, it's very soft and silky too. So very sort of different perhaps from some of the wracks that would dry up quite instantly. So that's our seaweeds. And we couldn't really talk about Strand Line without talking about crabs, or indeed anything to do with being at the beach without talking about crabs. The main crabs that we receive, we went rock pooling, would be a shore crab, an edible crab, and a spider crab. We wouldn't probably see that in a rock pool, but we might see elements of that as we see as we go further through on the Strand Line. And what's really interesting is that the crabs can shed their shells as they grow. And quite often, if you see a shell of a crab that you might think is a dead crab, it's probably actually just that it's been discarded, and that crab's then going to take a couple of days to grow itself a bigger shell. And that's why they end up in the Strand Line. So it's not necessarily that you're seeing lots and lots of dead crabs, it's just they've shed their shells. One of the most likely in a rock pool, and indeed on the shore and on the Strand Line, is a shore crab, and they're green, and they've got these markings here and here. They've also got these kind of teeth either side of their eyes, which are just located here, and that's how you would kind of identify that. If you were looking down as this one here into a rock pool, you just see he's looking right up there into his claws ready, just thinking whether or not we're going to try and catch him. And of course, if you are trying to do any rock pooling, it's really, really important that you respect the fact that these are living creatures, and perhaps it's best just to observe them rather than to catch them, because you can actually peer down, as we did in this picture here, and get quite a nice idea of what they are and what they're about without actually having to try and pick them up. And obviously, if you do want to, you feel that you do want to pick them up, is to go from behind with the pincer movement of your fingers behind here, so that their pincer movement from their claws doesn't get you from the front. Okay, the next crab, and I really do hate this, talking about this particular one, because the easiest way to describe it is this pie crust here of the edible crab. And again, you know, I don't like describing it like that, because it's not, you know, it's not very nice, but it is a really useful way, because it does look like a pie crust, and it is an edible crab. So I'm going to move on quickly from that one, because I don't like that one, and it is orange as well. The other orange crab we might see, and these here, the spider crab shells are really, really quite something, and they can really grow quite large as well. I was talking to a lady last year, I did a similar presentation, and she was telling me about scuba diving in the Solent, and they were very, very large, sort of, you know, 30 centimetres across, these spider crabs. Don't think we see those shells of those too much on our shores, but we certainly see quite large, sort of 10-centimetre ones. And you know, they are very unmistakably recognisable as a spider crab shell. So they're really cool find though, if you are lucky to see one. So that's our crabs.